Good morning and welcome to Samaritan Ministry of Greater Washington's 2022 Next Step Breakfast. My name is Jeff Bennett. I'm Chief Washington Correspondent for PBS NewsHour. I'm also a political contributor to MSNBC and NBC News. And I'm excited to be with you this morning, and I'm glad you could be here as well. We have a great program for you today, and in keeping with the tradition of the Next Step Breakfast, we plan to finish things up in just an hour. So let's get going. In these tough times, I'm so heartened and encouraged by the ways in which Samaritan Ministry has an unyielding commitment to service. Service to others is among our highest callings, and I'm honored to MC this morning's event, continuing in the tradition of my public media colleagues. What you do here this morning is important. The testimony you will hear is inspiring, but it will be your actions immediately after that determine the trajectory of this noble mission in 2022. And to that point, I want to thank our corporate sponsors today, Buckley Law Firm, LLP, Mortgage Bankers Association, Sandy Spring Bank, Meta Facebook, and J. Mallon Photo and Film. The generosity of our sponsors will cover all costs for the Next Step Breakfast today, and so I can assure you that 100% of your gifts and pledges this morning will be used exclusively to support Samaritan Ministry's work. We are grateful for their support. And with that, I'm pleased to introduce the Reverend Renata Eustace, pastor of Christ Lutheran Church, who will pray us in. Christ Lutheran Church is an important member of Samaritan Ministry's Partner Council, as well as a next-door neighbor to Samaritan's Northwest DC office. In fact, many of the pre-recorded portions of our program this morning were filmed on-site at Christ Lutheran Church. Pastor Eustace will invite a blessing on our mission and our time together this morning.
I'm walking on a labyrinth, and a labyrinth is different than a maze because there is a path to the center and you get there by walking prayerfully. And that seems to me to be a very good picture of the work of Samaritan Ministry. Let us pray. Awesome God, we thank you for this day that you have given to each of us. Thank you for drawing us in from many different places, for the gift of this technology, and for the gift of your Spirit, which holds us all together. Like this labyrinth, we get to the center. We get to where you want us to be, centered in ourselves, centered with each other, and centered in you, by taking one prayerful step at a time. We give thanks today for the way Samaritan Ministry is like a labyrinth for so many of us, participants, volunteers, church partners, and donors. We humbly ask for your leading and encouragement as each of us takes our next step. May we listen and learn from each other. Give us each sensitivity to truths that are different than our own and a willingness to seek your will, especially when it is hard and costly. Remind us that your will is abundant life for all. Give us the endurance not to settle for anything less. As we prayerfully move forward in a world that is so uncertain, as people who feel the shakiness of our own lives, fill us with trust in you this day and all days. In the name of Jesus, we pray. Amen.
Thank you, Pastor Eustace, for that prayer and for your presence with us today. And now, before I introduce our first speaker, we have a few words from Development Director Jeff Hale about our virtual platform, a platform, I'm told, was founded and created in Ukraine. And the Ukrainian people are certainly in our thoughts this morning.
Thank you, Jeff. It's great to have you with us today. And good morning to all of you out there. I want to share 2 technical tips for today that may come in handy for you. Number 1, if you want to explore the other Next Step breakfast materials this morning as we're going along, remember to open a new tab or page on your browser so that you don't accidentally click away from the live stream. Number 2, last year, Some viewers experienced a time lapse where they weren't seeing the same part of the show as their friends and guests. This can be fixed by clicking on the word live on your screen, which will then sync you with the live program. We have some wonderful speakers this morning, and if you're asking yourself, when I get inspired to make a gift or a pledge this morning, how do I do it? Don't worry, I'll be back later to explain everything step by step. But for now, please sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Back to you, Jeff.
Thanks to you, Jeff. I know you'll make sure we all know about it when the time comes. And now I'd like to introduce Reverend David B. Wolf, Executive Director of Samaritan Ministry of Greater Washington. David has served as Executive Director for almost 10 years and is an ordained Episcopal priest, having served churches in the district in Paterson, New Jersey. He describes himself as a, quote, recovering Washington lawyer, having worked for a time at the Justice Department under former Attorney General Janet Reno. He also served as a Senate staffer for the late Ted Kennedy. His passion is creating opportunity for otherwise disempowered folks to discover and realize their own potential to grow and become the people of God that God created them to be. He says this makes Samaritan a sweet spot for him, given its focus on partnering at all levels for transformational change, from program participants to other mission-minded organizations. David lives in Silver Spring, Maryland, with his wife, Martha, and together they are the adoptive parents to their sons, Jason, who's 17, and George, who's 12.
Thank you so much, Jeff. I'm delighted that you are our MC this year, fresh from your great new role on the NewsHour at PBS. And I'm delighted that you who are viewing are with us virtually for this year's Next Step Breakfast, wherever you are. Finally, I'm especially pleased if you're hearing about Samaritan Ministry for the first time today, to learn who we are, what we do, and where we're going. Why am I so pleased? Because Samaritan Ministry loves learners. We love people committed to their own learning and change. People perhaps stuck inside themselves who can't find a way out. People struggling to find meaningful employment or an affordable home. People who, from the parable of the Good Samaritan, are stuck in the ditch of life in need, not a patronizing hand out, but an empowering hand up out of that ditch. The ditch may come from bad breaks, bad choices, bad public policy, systemic racism, or the socioeconomic segregation of Greater Washington, or all of the above. But none of that matters when a participant sits down with a Samaritan Ministry caseworker. Then the only questions that matter are, if you want a better life, what do you think that looks like? And are you ready to change, and will you participate in that change by accepting the coaching required to achieve your own goals, taking the necessary next steps to meet them? If you can answer yes to all those challenging questions, then Samaritan caseworkers will give you all the coaching, all the expertise, all the technical support, and all the diligent follow-up you need for as long as you need it, just because you said yes. Now, I say you, and some of you who are listening are thinking, he doesn't mean me, he means the participants, you know, the clients stuck in the ditch. But who are you kidding? Who are we kidding? Because who among us has not been stuck? Do you see? What our participants receive in the Next Step program is what we all need. We call it rigorous compassion, but it's really two gifts. In one hand is the gift of material support and emotional encouragement. In the other hand is the gift of personal challenge and accountability. It's what your best friend or your spouse or your coach or your colleague or your pastor says that you would rather not hear, the truth in love. Rigorous compassion is a gift from someone we trust that empowers us to grow. And Samaritan Ministry offers that gift to folks who typically have no trustworthy person in their life to offer it. That is, until they come through our doors. Doors that are now in 6 locations, plus one big virtual space, courtesy of our remarkable pivot in the pandemic. So for almost 2 years, this space has delivered online Strive employment training, telephonic coaching, and in-person, in-kind support on the front porches of our 3 main offices. Now, with hybrid options evolving, we expect to engage and equip an increasing number of participants for this brave new world, especially the unemployed and underemployed, returning citizens, workers over 50, and those living with AIDS. In this digital era, I hasten to add that by equip, I mean more than one-on-one coaching and casework, as significant as that work is. I mean equipping technologically as well, with laptops and tablets through Samaritan's Loan to Own initiative, where goal-accomplishing participants earn a free, high-quality device by accomplishing their goals, so that they can continue their good work at their convenience at home. Shortly, you'll hear from former Next Step participant and Strive graduate Charles Hopkins speak of how, after nearly 50 years of incarceration, Charles learned not only how to navigate digital space, but also how to renegotiate life with the guidance of his Samaritan caseworker and Strive trainer. Charles' vocational choice to give back to fellow returning citizens who need guidance in the reentry process suggests a deep call to service, not just sustainability. But there's another ingredient in Samaritan's human empowerment recipe, because when we invite a participant into Next Step, we also invite ourselves. So a quote that's been on my office door since Samaritan's earliest days reads, "If you have come to help me, you are wasting your time. But if you have come because your liberation is bound up in mine, then let us work together." Over 36 years later, that wisdom still speaks to who we are and the change work we're all about through Next Step, inviting partnership on all levels. Friends, Samaritan Ministry wasn't founded to help people with a handout, but to participate in their liberation, with the implied invitation that those whom we serve will participate in ours. This demands a level of passion, commitment, and vulnerability not found in many places. But Samaritan Ministry isn't just any place. We're a pioneering nonprofit in an area struggling with an increasing socioeconomic gap, a gap that is growing due to not only the disproportionate impact of the pandemic, but also the systemic racism visited upon our Black and brown brothers and sisters, and a socioeconomic segregation between those of us who do very well and those of us who are just trying to get a toehold on a steep economic slope. Samaritan Ministry relies heavily on volunteers because we believe in mutual liberation and a community partnership where everyone experiences for themselves the change they want to see in the world. Following Charles's segment, you'll hear from Karen Neal, a volunteer whose own lived experience and professional training qualified her to be the volunteer casework associate she was in our Southeast DC Anacostia office. She'll testify to how her own roots in historic Anacostia shaped her, led her away, and then led her back to Anacostia to empower current residents to discover a more sustainable and meaningful life than they had known. When I speak of community partnership, I'm speaking of how we cultivate in ourselves and the community at large. Our partner council represents a community of communities that includes over 250 volunteers and over 75 partner churches, schools, and service providers throughout Greater Washington. This is a collaborative network, fully empowered to make a difference in the lives of our neighbors who simply seek a hand up. And not long ago, this collaboration gave rise to a new vision that is pointing us to a higher level of service, a level where participants can virtually connect with us anywhere in the region, a level where Strive employment readiness training results not just in short-term job acquisition, but also in long-term vocational fulfillment, a level where we connect homeless adults living on the edge of poverty with an affordable home, and finally, a level where partners offer not only their time and treasure to support individual change work, but also where they collectively invest in a mission of community change, one that includes dismantling the structures that allow the systemic racism of the region to continue while the resulting poverty prospers. Where are we in terms of our goal fulfillment? Well, we're just getting started, but the impact is already happening. First, increased participant accessibility via virtual options, plus a sixth actual location in the North Capitol Street corridor, set to officially open in April. Second, as the pandemic subsides, expanded hard-skill partnership options and placement options for Strive training graduates. Third, direct integration of the work of other service providers whose missions complement our own. While greater engagement is expected as the pandemic subsides, Next Step participants already have more options than they did before it began. It's hard work, but the recipe is right. Rigorously compassionate coaching, plus proven training, plus access to opportunity equals the hand-up participants need in this overpriced, underserved, and socioeconomically segregated region. Yes, results inspire, but I find our recipe to be the most inspiring because it reminds me that my liberation is found in welcoming the stranger who is really our neighbor in disguise, temporarily stuck in life's ditch. Inspired by what you've heard from Charles and Karen, please consider what you can commit to today from your time, talent, and treasure. But also consider the possibility that by making your commitment, you will grow in ways you never could ask for nor imagine. And what greater gift could we receive as we offer our own? Thank you for listening. Thank you for being the gifts that you are to each other, but especially to our would-be neighbor, stuck in life's ditch, who is you and me. Thank you.
Thank you, David, and thank you for the work that you and everyone at Samaritan Ministry are doing in the community. Now it's my pleasure to introduce our first guest speaker this morning, Mr. Charles Hopkins. Charles is a Next Step participant, a Strive graduate, and a returning citizen. I'll let him tell you the rest of his incredible story.
Yesterday, March the 10th, I was arrested 49 years ago for armed robbery and murder. After I was talking to Dr. Wolf about the speech I was about to prepare and the enlightenment that he was giving me, I looked at the calendar and realized that I had been arrested 49 years ago yesterday. How I got in that situation, what caused me to be in that predicament, is a long story, but I can abbreviate it for you. I made bad decisions. The first bad decision I made was I dropped out of school in the 10th grade. The next bad decision I made was I went into Job Corps and dropped out of Job Corps after 9 months. Therefore, not allowing myself to be able to acquire a trade and a skill that would allow me to be able to navigate society and be a productive member of society. The third bad decision I made when I came back to Washington, D.C. in 1968, heroin was prevalent in the communities where I lived at. So the next bad decision I made was to start using drugs. Ultimately, I became addicted to heroin, which led to my fourth bad decision and led to March the 10th of 1973. I found myself with others trying to get some money to get heroin, and a foil robbery attempt landed someone, caused me to kill someone, or me killing someone, better still, and ultimately being convicted and sentenced to the Maryland Penitentiary for the sentence of life plus 20. I was there at the age of 20 years old. This was a new experience for me, and mindful, it was a horrifying experience as well. You would ask, how did I survive, or how did I get by it, how did I get over it, how did I overcome it? I remember reading in an NA text where it said, through our inability to accept personal responsibility, we were slowly committing suicide. And it was my inability to accept personal responsibility that got me there, but it's my ability to accept personal responsibility that was going to get me out. So I started accepting personal responsibility for my behavior. I started accepting personal responsibility for the decision I made to use drugs. I accepted the personal responsibility that I had accepted when I dropped out of school, and so forth. While in this environment, and it was a blight environment, and it was dark, there was no light at the end of the tunnel, I often wondered if I would make it out, if I would survive, because of the harshness of this environment. But by the grace of God and my determination, I did survive. But survival came at a price. Oftentimes I made bad decisions again, because I'm not trying to say that because I made bad decisions that I became all of a sudden a person of good decision making. No, I made bad decisions within this 48 years of imprisonment. But the decisions that I was making then, I understood them and I immediately corrected them. And as I progressed through the system, I got my GED, I got college, I got trade. I became involved with all type of social groups and started mentoring other prisoners. So this was my growth and my maturation. December the 5th, 2019, I was released from prison after serving 48 years and some change. Now I'm out, and you would ask, well, how would I feel? What did I feel like? And I'm gonna be honest with you, I was numb. First of all, when I was released, I didn't know if my family members had got the message that I was coming out, so I didn't know whether or not I was going to have a transportation from Baltimore City back to the District of Columbia. So I wasn't even really thinking about, oh, I'm out of prison. I've been locked up all these years. I was thinking about, how can I get a ride out of Baltimore City and get back to D.C., familiar territory? And as I was getting out, I seen somebody getting ready to get on the bus with a cell phone, which was not new to me, but odd to me, to be able to say, and I asked the person, I said, look, can you let me make a call? She said, well, I'm getting on the bus. And the woman was coming off the bus, an elderly woman, and I walked up to her, I said, miss, look, I've been locked up 48 years. They gave me $50 to get home. All I want to do, I'm going to give you $25 if you let me make a phone call, or you call one of my family and let them know I'm here. And I heard somebody call my name out, and it was my sister and them. And it was only when I got back home that I really realized that I was out of prison and I was no longer be subjected to the routine of the imprisonment. But getting out wasn't as peaceful, or getting out wasn't as productive, or getting out wasn't really as comfortable as I thought it would be. Because now I have to live life on life terms. And I'm coming out of prison after 48 years, and there's a lot of things I don't know. And there's a lot of fears and anxiety that I had. The first thing I did was I started identifying resources that directly related to returning citizens. I had been involved with a group called Voices for a Second Chance, and they had put out these apps and saying, like, if you want to get these apps to tell you about services that's being offered, then just sign up. And I was constantly getting apps of services being off. And I got an app from Samaritan Ministry from the Strive program. And on it said, get $125 for signing up for the program. So I'm thinking that I'll sign up and get $125 and that'd be the end of that. Well, that wasn't the end of that, and thankful it wasn't, because through this process I learned and I developed some social skills, because at this point, COVID had just hit. So unlike everybody else that had a lot of anxiety about COVID, I was in a familiar environment. I was in a restricted environment because remember, the city was locked down, the nation was locked down, and all movement was restricted. I was comfortable. And I was on Zoom. I was constantly networking with different people, and then I got involved with Strive. And Strive, and being involved with Strive, Miss Duffy that was our instructor. I got involved with Samaritan Ministry, with Miss Sophia Nolte, who was my case manager. And these people allowed me to be able to look at myself and understand some of my deficiencies, and not let my deficiencies define me, but to understand that they are just what they are, and they can be changed like anything else. So I was able to, through Strive, acquire certain social skills. I was able to, through Strive, to get an understanding of the workplace. I was able, through Strive, to be able to do a resume and do interviews, and to be able to really maximize on my strengths and understand my weakness. And it was through the Samaritan Ministry that Ms. Nolte had made me aware during the process of being in Strive that this was a lifelong process, that I would always have access to the case management system. And they would periodically call me. After I finished Strive, I had got a job. I was homeless. I was living in a shelter. And I had signed up for Georgetown Pivot Program. And when I was involved with Georgetown Pivot Program and constantly networking with Samaritan Ministry and other entities that was involved with reentry, that I was linked up with somebody that was dealing with housing. And ultimately, I got my own place. I was able to save some money from being in the shelter. And I was able to get a perspective on what is needed, what I need to do to help others in similar situations. So today what I'm doing is I'm involved in all things reentry. I'm currently involved with a podcast that's deal with identifying and addressing the needs of people that's coming out. I'm networking with Samaritan Ministry and doing speaking. I'm also networking with them and trying to develop a pipeline of returning citizens that can network with their services. And I'm listening to everybody, and I'm trying to learn as much as I can. To say that March the 10th, yesterday, I will be standing in front of a camera or standing and speaking 48 years or 49 years later, I didn't really imagine this. But by the grace of God and the goodwill of all the people that have helped me, I'm able to say that I have been helped, and I'm thankful for it. And my message to anyone that's listening is, you can measure your success in your program by the people that you affect. The return on your investment will be them. When you see the person come back and offer the help, or when you contact the person later on in life and ask them what they're doing and they're being productive, then you can say without assured that, yes, I have did something good. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Hopkins, for sharing your personal story of perseverance and fortitude with us. It was inspiring, and we look forward to seeing where your next steps will take you. Now, as David mentioned earlier, transformation at Samaritan Ministry is a two-way street, and it's not just the participants who benefit from the work being done there. With that in mind, it's now my pleasure to welcome our next speaker, Ms. Karen Neal. Although she recently retired to Texas to be closer to family, Ms. Neal spent years embodying the spirit of volunteerism at Samaritan Ministry. Karen, take it away.
Hi, my name is Karen Neal, and I want to share my experience as a Next Step program volunteer. A few years ago, I sat at the Next Step breakfast with several others from my church, and I learned a tiny bit about the work of Samaritan Ministry. There was a little card at each place setting that invited anyone interested in learning more and possibly volunteering to fill out. I was impressed by those who spoke, especially the participant, so I filled out the card. Much to my surprise, just 3 days later, I was contacted and invited to become a volunteer. I accepted. Now, understand, I was not thrown into this potentially life-altering work without preparation. I was interviewed and went through extensive training to be a caseworker associate. As part of my training, experienced volunteers, also known as part-time staff, let me sit in on their meetings with participants. They showed me how they guided participants through their next steps and made it clear why the program is so named. They did not do the work for them. They were guides who provided subtle navigation, but had the participants do the work. Now, this is one of the tenets of Samaritan ministry that most impressed me. And one of my earliest experiences during training was observing the interaction between a volunteer and a participant. That participant jumped up and cheered, and I mean really cheered, because he had just learned that he had a job. His delight was so pure that I felt his joy. You see, his success and joy became mine, and I wasn't even the volunteer who worked with him. By shadowing experienced volunteers and staff members, I was able to see, hear, and experience firsthand their interactions with the participant and to appreciate the impact of Samaritan ministry. I began as a caseworker associate at the Southeast DC Anacostia office, which is right next to St. Philip's Episcopal Church on U Street. Challenges of unemployment, homelessness, or forced shared housing, limited transportation options, limited resources for groceries, laundries, and other necessities that most of us just take for granted, and also dealing with exposure to all forms of violence, often surround many in this area of Southeast. We taught people how to complete applications on the computer. We suggested resources, we shared information, we gave gentle and as necessary, not so gentle pushes in a positive, constructive direction. Most importantly, we celebrated when someone scored a job, a better place to live, or a seat in a training program that would improve options in their life. Throughout these experiences, I learned names, needs, and personalities. I learned what might work, what would not work, and no matter what, how to regroup. Identifying new possibilities, untapped resources, and alternative ways to address issues helped to keep my own brain young and strong. Providing information about burial resources for loved ones who were HIV positive kept my heart soft. And working with everyone made me feel more in touch with my humanity and my sense of responsibility for the world I live in. Many of our participants learned about Samaritan Ministry of Greater Washington from other participants, friends, families, churches, and DC, Maryland, and Virginia agencies. Thank you to all who encouraged anyone to come through our doors. You have no idea how many lives you have impacted with that simple push. I want to extend a thank you to every donor and every partner church. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Because of your generosity, all of this exists. Some of you donate individually, some as groups, both small and large, and some as corporations. You have donated baskets and you have bid on them too. You have supported functions like the fun-filled annual gala. You donate food and supplies for us to share with our many participants. You provide the means for us to serve in different locations in DC, Maryland, and Virginia, and bring opportunities to those who seek to make their lives better. Thank you, my fellow volunteers. You are champions. Working hand in hand with you made the sun shine even on cloudy days. Always willing to say, hey, can we try this? Should we adjust that? What can we do to make a real difference? My fellow volunteers, I hope you all know that everything you do makes a positive difference every day, not only for the participants, but for all of us. I was tasked with sharing how my experience as a volunteer with this organization has impacted me as a person. Being a volunteer with Samaritan Ministry made me feel empowered to conquer some of the negatives surrounding us and to think outside of the box, especially during the pandemic. Serving at Samaritan Ministry put a smile on my face each and every time I walked through the door. Every meeting, every workshop, every event, every Zoom conversation. I am grateful for the experiences that I was privileged to have, as well as for the opportunity to work with such hardworking and giving people who really helped me to continue to grow. Please continue to support and ask your friends to support the efforts of everyone here. Thank you for listening.
And thank you, Ms. Neal, for your years of volunteer service and for sharing your experience with us this morning. We're grateful for all that you have done over the years to serve Samaritan's participants, and we wish you continued happiness in your retirement in Texas. And now it's my pleasure to introduce the president of the Board of Directors at Samaritan Ministry of Greater Washington, Mr. Joe Kohler.
Good morning. I've been involved with Samaritan Ministry for over 8 years. This is my 6th year on the board and my 2nd as board president. You know, you think you really understand an organization when you've been around it as long as I have. Each year you learn a bit more about the program, the history of how things got started, where changes have been made along the way. You learn a bit more about the lives of the staff. And among the staff, you get to know a little bit more about program staff, those on the front line, meeting and working with our participants. And you even get to know some of the participants, usually ones who have made great strides in the program to the point where they are willing to share their story, like Charles, who you heard earlier. But up until a year ago, I must admit that my understanding of Samaritan, what really makes it tick, didn't really capture the reality. That changed when I was asked to join Samaritan's Racial Equity and Justice Roundtable that was established by Samaritan after the murder of George Floyd. It was a facilitated conversation among frontline program staff in other roles, volunteers, board members, the executive director, and partner reps that met on Zoom for an hour and a half every other week for just over a year. The goal and purpose was to discuss racial equity within Samaritan and racial justice within our broader community. And out of that conversation, by design, arose recommendations to the board that hopefully will move us forward in this critically important area. For me, that experience was formative. It opened my eyes to the lived experiences of our frontline program staff and the participants they serve in a society still characterized by huge racial disparities in wealth, income, job and social opportunities, health care, and food security. But it also showed me in a more real way what makes Samaritan work. I was blown away by the commitment and dedication of our caseworkers to our participants. The care and concern for the participants was so obvious in their stories, comments, and recommendations that it was like they were advocating for a family member. And in truth, they were, for that is how they are treated. I came to understand what leads participants to come back to their caseworker after a particularly difficult time or after a slip-up, and to keep going. Simply put, it's trust. When you are living on the edge of poverty and you experience a setback, it can be very hard to reach back out to your caseworker. But they come back because their biggest advocate is at Samaritan, their caseworker, someone who treats them like family, someone they trust. Trust not only to be totally on their side, but trust to hold them accountable so they can realize their own capabilities and their inherent dignity. Trust that treats them as a peer. I came to understand that our caseworkers invest themselves, really body and soul, in the work of Samaritan Ministry, empowering our participants to do what they need to do to improve their lives, whether it be securing a job, a home, or getting the training and education necessary to help move them forward. So our caseworkers are doing the work and empowering our participants to do their work. Now it's our opportunity to do our part. We've got about a $1.4 million budget at Samaritan. That covers the ongoing costs of occupying our 5 locations, with 2 more planned to open this year, the salaries of our 15 full-time paid professional staff, all program support costs, including things like laptops for our participants who need to submit job applications online, which you can't do on a smartphone, and everything else that a small but impactful nonprofit needs to operate in the DC metro area. Our specific collective goal this morning is to raise $300,000 toward that budget to support the work of Samaritan and enable it to reach and build trusting relationships with even more participants, particularly following this pandemic, which has made outreach to new participants much harder. And thanks to our corporate sponsors, who have already covered today's expenses, all donations go directly to support the work I've just described. Okay, how do we get there? First, for those who are meeting Samaritan for the first time, become a new donor. I promise you, the bang is worth your buck. I hope you've been inspired by the program and that Samaritan becomes an important part of your life, as it has mine. And if you can do so, give or pledge now at least $1,000 for this year. Let me pause here to say any amount is greatly appreciated, but we encourage you to think in terms of proportionate giving. As we know, wealth is concentrated in this country, and so I invite you to think about what you can give in terms of a proportion or percentage of what you have. Second, if you have given before, express your confidence in Samaritan by doubling what you gave before. Wouldn't it be great if we could double the number of participants we reach because you stretched to double your own donation? Please consider pledging that double amount. If you're inspired and can afford it, we're looking for 24 commitments or gifts of $5,000 for this year. We already have 6. We are seeking 12 commitments or gifts of $10,000. We have 4 people who have stepped up already at this amount. Next, can we get 6 gifts or commitments of $20,000 or more, which is the minimum amount for membership in our director's circle? I'm delighted to say 2 donors have already made that commitment. And one of those donors I'm announcing today is my wife, Kathy, and me. It was a stretch for us, but we're making that commitment today because we both believe strongly in Samaritan, its staff, and our participants. We're asking you to consider a similar gift or annual pledge of at least $20,000 to Samaritan this morning. Finally, we are looking for at least 2 gifts of $50,000 or more. Wow, that's a big number, way out of reach for many people. But not all. We have one person who has already committed at that level. So we're looking for at least 1 more. This may be the time to put some of your resources to work for our neighbors in need. In one of the early meetings of the round table that I mentioned earlier, one of the members remarked on the importance of preparing for the meetings because, quote, we're dealing with the future of Samaritan ministry and it's a profound responsibility. I felt that way too as we opened ourselves up to each other, people of different races, backgrounds, and cultures, to speak from the heart about equity and justice. I also feel that way now. We are dealing with the future of Samaritan ministry, and it is a profound responsibility. Please join me in rising to this occasion now to show our financial support for Samaritan ministry, particularly in honor of our caseworkers, the trust they inspire in our participants and the participants themselves as they work to achieve their goals. With that, I'll turn it over to Jeff, our development director, who will walk you through the pledge form before we make our commitments. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. You support our work in so many ways with your time, talent, and treasure, and we deeply appreciate all that you do for Samaritan. I'm now going to take a moment and explain the various ways you can make a pledge or a gift today. There are several ways you can do it. You just need to find the one that works for you. Okay, here we go. First, remember my earlier tips about opening a new tab or page on your browser so that you don't accidentally click away from our live stream. It's very important for the next 5 to 10 minutes. And also, if you do accidentally click away from the live stream, be sure to click the word live when you return so that you sync back up with the live presentation. Second, just remember this link. It should be right there below you on our screen right now, and it's right on our website. Chances are that you're already familiar with it if you're watching me right now. This webpage has direct links to an online giving form where you can make a one-time gift or set up a monthly donation. There's also a direct link to our Next Step Breakfast pledge form for those who wish to make a traditional annual pledge with quarterly payments. We are also, once again, offering our secure text-to-give option. If you were at the gala or last year's Next Step Breakfast, this should be familiar to you. Our special number is 202-933-1920. You should be able to see it on your screen now right below me. Let's keep it on the screen there if we can. If you want to make a one-time gift or a recurring monthly gift, text NS Gift to 202-933-1920 and follow the prompts. If you're making a pledge, you'll be asked to make part of your gift today, and then the remainder will be charged to your credit card either monthly or quarterly. Again, that's NS Gift to 202-933-1920. To learn more about volunteering with Samaritan Ministry, just text NSVOL to 202-933-1920, and again, just follow the prompts. If you're not a subscriber to our bi-monthly e-newsletter, InStep, you can sign up for that too. Just text the word InStep to 202-933-1920. It only comes out 6 times a year, and it's a great way to stay informed about what we're doing. Finally, if you would like to make your pledge by phone, this year we even have you covered there. Since we're fortunate to have PBS's Jeff Bennett as our MC today, I'll go ahead and say it. For the next 15 minutes, our operators are standing by. Just call 202-722-2280 and someone will be happy to take down your information. All of these options will be included in the slideshow coming up and after our program, and you can see them there as well. Thank you for making our work in the community possible. Now, we'll pause for a few minutes to give you an opportunity to make a gift or a pledge. If you have a table captain, they will be happy to answer any questions you have. Again, as I mentioned, we'll have a slideshow playing in the background, and then Jeff will return to wrap things up. So stick around.
All right, everybody. So we've reached the conclusion of our time together this morning. I want to thank you for joining us on this beautiful Saturday morning. Thank you especially for your commitments of time, talent, and treasure. The pledges and gifts you make to Samaritan Ministry today will be a hand up to them as they continue their work in the coming year. Special thanks to Charles Hopkins and Karen Neal, who inspired us. Great thanks to Joe Kohler for challenging us to give. And special thanks again to our Next Step Breakfast sponsors who collectively covered all of the costs of this morning's event so that all of your contributions and pledges directly support our participants. Sponsors were featured in the pre-show slides and are listed in the program booklet on our website. But one more time, a big thank you to Buckley Law Firm, Sandy Springs Bank, Mortgage Bankers Association, Meta Facebook, and J. Mallon Photo and Film. Thanks to Mob of One for providing our pre-show music as well. Finally, a great big thank you to our captain of the table captains, Carol Coonrod, and all of our table captains, staff, and volunteers who made today's breakfast possible. Our deepest appreciation.